It's time to harvest peanuts. I'll show you how and when to harvest them, plus what to do with the plants after you harvest to improve the soil's tilth and fertility. Peanuts are ready anywhere from 110 days to 150 days, depending on the variety that you plant. The ones I planted are red Tennessees. They're a Valencia variety, and they're really good for the cooler and shorter day growing. Where you have other varieties like the runners, the Virginia, and the Spanish, these are for longer days, and they're typically 140 days to the 150 days to mature. I planted my Tennessee Reds in the middle of June, so that puts me about 110 days right now. So it's getting really close if it's not already time to harvest. So I need to check my crop to make sure it's time. Another really good indicator that your peanuts are ready to be harvested is that the plants will begin to turn yellow. If your plants were hit by a frost before you're able to harvest them, just make sure that you harvest them within a week to 10 days. Otherwise, if you have no foliage because of the frost, then those peanuts can actually rot in the ground. You should stop watering your peanut plants about 10 days before you start your digging. This will help the peanut's shell to harden, plus with that last little bit of development of the peanut itself. Also, by cutting back on that water, you reduce the risk of having mold in your peanuts, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. My peanut plants here are still pretty green and lush, so it's not quite time to harvest. But once they start turning yellow, and the tips on these are just starting to turn yellow, they actually turn pretty rapidly. So this week I'll be cutting the water off on these guys so they won't get water anymore, and that'll help speed that yellowing process up. When it starts to yellow, that puts the energy down into the peanut seeds themselves and helps with that development. So I know within about a week to 2 weeks it'll be time to harvest. Peanuts will form on the roots of their plants, and they're generally just within that top 3 inches of the soil. Before pulling up your plants, you want to check the progress of your peanuts. You want to make sure that they're fully developed. And I usually will dig around and pull up 1 or 2 and just check them. You want to make sure that you have paper thin shells and that those seeds are actually filling those shells completely. This peanut is getting pretty close. The shell on it is still fairly thick and there's a lot of moisture in it. But the leaves are green, and as they start to turn yellow, because we're going to be cutting back the water now, and then they're going to put all of that energy down into these peanuts, and that'll help their development process come along really nice. But we've got about another week to week and a half before these are ready to harvest. Once your plants have turned yellow and your shells of your peanuts have thinned, plus the peanuts have filled those shells, it's time to harvest. And you can actually just pull the whole plant up itself. And a lot of times those peanuts will stick to that root system, especially if you've got really good soil. But a good idea is to use a cultivator rake and dig around, because there'll always be some peanuts left in that soil. Once you get your peanuts all pulled, you can dry these right on the vine like this. But you usually have both on the plant, and you end up having some that you dug up in the ground. So I like to just keep them in one place and lay them in a tray out flat so that they can dry really nicely. If you live in an area where your humidity is high, you'll probably want to just pick all of these off and put them in a dehydrator just to speed that process along, because you don't want these to mold. Make sure that you save some of your peanuts out for the following year for planting. I like to save the biggest peanuts because that gives you a bigger and better crop. Peanut seeds are usually viable for about a year just at room temperature, but you can prolong that viability by putting them in the refrigerator, and they generally last for about 3 years. Peanuts aren't always the easiest to find online or in garden centers, so saving them yourself, which is really easy, is a great idea. And when you save them, you want to make sure that you keep them in their shell. They're going to keep much better this way. You can boil, roast, or even eat your peanuts raw. If you want to learn how to grow peanuts, then I'll put a link here for more information. You may have heard that you shouldn't eat raw peanuts, but you can. They're packed full of health benefits. They make a great high protein snack, and in many ways, they're better for you raw than they are cooked. As long as your raw peanuts show no signs of mold, then they can be eaten raw. A lot of times when they're dried and not dried properly, they can develop a mold, and this can cause health problems. Peanuts are legumes, and the legumes have an amazing ability to fix the nitrogen in the soil. Generally speaking, the higher the protein, the higher the ability for plants to fix nitrogen in the soil. And peanuts, they're loaded with protein. Planting a cover crop that you probably didn't even know you were doing and getting a harvest, now that's a dual purpose crop worth planting. Peanuts store nitrogen within the plants themselves, and by turning that back into the soil, that'll stimulate the soil microbes, so then they can break it down and make that nitrogen available for future plants. After harvesting, you can just lay the plant over the surface and put some compost over the top of it. Just as long as you have soil contact, that'll help that plant to break down fairly quickly. You can also make a trench and lay those plants in it, or even dig a hole and put the plant in it. Just as long as it has soil contact, then it'll improve that tilth of the soil and the nutrients of that soil. Peanuts are easy and fun to grow. They taste good, they improve the soil, they're virtually pest-free. If you didn't grow peanuts this year, then definitely do it next. If you found value in this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications of our future content. And happy harvesting in that soil. And peanuts are packed full of protein. They taste good, and I don't know what I'm saying, but you can. They're packed full of. Oh, okay. On both on the plants, and I don't know what else. Oh God, don't put that in there. Okay. Gotten thin, and okay. Yay! Really helps with the developing process of those peanuts in that nice little I feel like that's too short. This whole wiggly, it's hard.